This next order goes Thunderball, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, and then For Your Eyes Only. I love this one. I love talking about this order, and this might take 2 clips, but here we go, starting with Thunderball. Thunderball basically begins I call it the Blofeld quadrilogy or tetralogy, and it's basically 4 films all on Blofeld. There's a 5th one I include For Your Eyes Only, but it's more of a transition film, and I'll get to explaining that when I get there. But Thunderball, the continuity in it is there's a lot of double O's, 9 double O's seated in order at the conference about Blofeld's holding the United States and Britain for ransom, for hostage. Then we have the Spectre agents and their meeting, and they're just briefly, one side is even numbers and the other side is odd numbers. There's a whole thing with that, and that's briefly it. Number 7 is Asian, which connects him possibly to the agent in Goldfinger. There's Q's back, and Moneypenny and M. I guess I'll pause here and talk about the Q issue. There's 3 Qs, but there's 4 actors. The first one appeared in Dr. No, and his name was Major Boothroyd. Then later, I believe it is The Spy Who Loved Me, Anya Masafa calls Desmond Llewellyn's Q Major Boothroyd. So we know those are all the same. He doesn't show up in Live and Let Die. And then when we get to The World Is Not Enough, John Cleese shows up as R to be the predecessor of Desmond Llewellyn's Q. And then in Die Another Day, R becomes Q, so John Cleese is Q. And then we have a break with Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. There's no Q, and then we have the new Q, the younger Q, start in Skyfall and continue in Spectre. So we have 3 different. Q is basically a code name, is what that's all about. Another thing, going back to the Spectre agents, is that we know that when they're killed, they no longer exist and they're replaced. And Emilio Largo is number 2. And I have a Blofeld theory, and at the end of this, at the end of these 5 films, I'm going to talk about my Blofeld theory. And then just continuing with these Spectre agents, I think, okay, if you look on the right side, I believe that's the odd number ones. And I believe 9 and 11 are the ones that are next to each other, and 9 is the one that's killed. And then there's a bigger, more heavy-set guy that's sitting next to number 9. Now, the guy in front of him is number 7. So we have it goes 7, that guy, and then 9 is killed, and then 11. What I think is going on there is, okay, since that whole side is odd numbers, but it's off because of that extra guy, what I think Blofeld does is he brings somebody in as he executes a unloyal agent and replaces that new agent in that spot, and that's sort of his initiation, and he sees the danger, so he knows he needs to be loyal. We see this in From Russia with Love when man, I forget his name. Mozeni, I think it is. It's the same guy who plays Golgov's character. He comes in and he kills Kronstein with the foot blade in front of Rosa Klebb. And then we see it also at the Spectre table in the film Spectre, where Mr. Hanks kills the other guy who's there. He puts his fingernails through his eyes, breaks his neck. And so we have this sense of, Blofeld is in charge of this. Bond kills number 2, which leads us to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Okay, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is made out of production order. In the novels, it's Thunderball, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then You Only Live Twice, and it's the Blofeld trilogy. In fact, The Spy Who Loved Me is between Thunderball and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. But it's from the perspective of a woman, and Spectre is mentioned, but nothing happens in there with it. And the reason On Her Majesty's Secret Service is next, and this is a huge thing as far as has a lot of continuity issues that back up one single James Bond. It also is the precedence for the films being made out of order, not chronologically, and it shows it also in it. And the way that I'm going to how it happens is, okay, basically the beginning of that film, Bond is on a secret mission called Operation Bedlam, and it's to capture Blofeld. And I believe he's doing that obviously because of the previous films, especially Thunderball, where Blofeld, threatens the world with nuclear weapons and puts a ransom out for them. And so after Bond gets these weapons and kills Largo, which actually Domino is the one who does it, he goes on this mission, and he's hunting to find Blofeld. Well, he can't do it. He's had 2 years, I think M says, and he's not able to do it, so he cuts him off from doing it. Why is this film before You Only Live Twice? Well, for some reason, they made You Only Live Twice first. I don't know why. It doesn't say. I know Connery was having some difficulties with them. So I'm not exactly... The reason isn't known. But then they had Peter Hunt become the director for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and I think what their plan is they're basically telling us they jumped a book. And how this comes out in the film, and it's shown in the film, is in the beginning credits, we see 2 major things. And these are also continuity connectors. One is Dr. No is shown, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, and You Only Live Twice are all shown in the opening credits sequence. But what happens is, and what it shows is there's an hourglass, and all the previous movies are going down into it. But then it also has a clock, and the clock is going in reverse. So that what they're saying is they're going back in time, which tells me they're going back in time to the previous story that happens between Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, which is on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and from now I'm just going to call it Miss. And the interesting thing is, throughout the film, they reference the previous movies, all of them, except for You Only Live Twice. So when Bond when he resigns, he goes into his desk, he picks up the phone, he says 007 this, which is to James Bond. That's him habitually thinking he's an agent and then telling his real name, because he's not anymore. He's James Bond. That's his real name. But then he pulls out of his desk the knife from Dr. No, Honey Rider's knife, the choking wire from Red Grant from Russia with Love, the breathing apparatus from Thunderball. So that references those three films. Goldfinger gets referenced twice. Once from the janitor, that whistles, he's whistling the Goldfinger theme. And then lastly, at the end of the film, he is Draco and M are talking about the bullion job from 1964. I believe they say the fall of 1964, where Draco and M lost good men to one another. Well, they're talking about gold bullion. And 1964, the fall of 1964 was when Goldfinger was produced, when it was released into theaters. So, but nowhere do they talk about You Only Live Twice. So that tells me that they are going back in time. Now, the conundrum that we have in all this is that how come Telly Savalas doesn't recognize Bond as, he's Blofeld? Now, that plays into my Blofeld theory, which I'll cover that later, but suffice it to say, as of now, in fact, in the film, they say that Bond was wearing a disguise. And technically, if you want, in the books, he gets plastic surgery. So technically, you can kind of say, well, Sean Connery has a disguise that looks like George Lazenby. You could pretend and do that. And back then, it was simple like that. They didn't go into huge details like we do now, where, they use their imagination more. Today, it's a little bit more unrealistic. But later, I'll explain to you another theory. But for now, that's what they intended. They even say it in the film. So, and that's just how films were made back then. That's how they were structured and functioned with situations like that. You didn't have to have a huge disguise to be disguised. It was in the audience's mind to understand that, a small disguise could cover you completely. So, with that said, at the end, Tracy is murdered, but the attempt was not to kill Tracy, it was to kill Bond, if you notice, and they miss Bond and they hit Tracy. So that brings up the next film,